What's up, everybody, and welcome into the 24/7 Sports College Basketball Show. I'm your host, the 24/7 Sports Director of Scouting, Adam Finkelstein, and I am going to be joined this week by our own Isaac Trotter. We are about 2+ weeks into the college basketball season, and things have not shaken out so far exactly how we expected. Some teams that we were expecting to be among the nation's best, programs like Alabama, Duke, Houston, they've all got a loss. And then we have some individual players, transfers in particular, that we thought were going to be among the best players in college basketball, and they are not necessarily living up to the hype early on. But we do have players and teams that are exceeding expectations, and that is what we are going to be breaking down in this week's show. Before we get started, make sure you smash that like button. Make sure you share, subscribe, all those things you do if you are watching us on the 24/7 YouTube channel. Without further ado, I'm going to welcome in Isaac Trotter.
What's up,
Isaac? What's up, man?
Not bad, not bad. I feel like college basketball right now has been kind of a fun 2 weeks. Scoring is up through the roof. A lot of teams have started to play a little bit better than maybe we initially thought. So it's kind of fun to break it all down after 2 weeks. I feel like the offseason's a big homework assignment of like, hey, what are these teams going to play like? And the first 2 weeks are like, hey, did we get anything right?
No doubt. So before we get started, though, I'm gonna surprise you with a question that you didn't know was coming, because I just read your column today on CBSSports.com. And I left thinking, how many games a day does this dude watch? So that is my question to you. Like, how many games a day are you consuming?
Probably 2 at night. And then in the mornings, I'm probably watching 3 or 4 games on Synergy. So like, that's kind of my game. Yeah. I try to do the abbreviated version without the commercials and stuff like that. But I don't necessarily do a bunch of multi-screen looks because I feel like I can learn a little bit more about the teams when I'm just honing in on one game. So I don't do like the 4 quad box or anything. I just like try to focus on one game. But yeah, it's a lot of basketball over here.
So last night we're sitting on the couch. I had like Marquette Purdue on the TV. I was watching highlights of Arkansas while I'm like taking notes. My wife sits down. She's like, yeah, I'm getting up. I can't do this. I don't know how you're doing this with all these screens, but I digress. All right, Trotter, here's what we're doing today. We are talking about the players that have exceeded expectations, and then we are going to talk about the teams that have exceeded expectations. Now, this is pretty self-explanatory, but I do want to emphasize we're not talking about NBA prospects, because I especially like to do that very frequently. This is plainly who has been the best college basketball player over the first 16, 17 days of the season, not taking into account what they could be down the road. You and I both came up with 3 names. We're going to break them down, not just from a statistical perspective, but in terms of what we are seeing between the lines that has helped them get those stats and impact winning. I will allow you the first pick in this selection here. Who has exceeded your expectations so far?
Well, let's go to Wisconsin and look at John Tonje, the transfer out of Missouri, and he has been phenomenal. Obviously dropped 41 points against Arizona, which was really eye-popping, but I think the process of how he got here is fascinating. I talked with Greg Gard about this. They kind of viewed Moneyball as guys who are transfers maybe coming from losing programs. Last year, John Tonje was on a Missouri team that didn't win an SEC game, and now he didn't play very much. But a lot of people might have had some stink on him. He transfers to Wisconsin, and he has become maybe the best player on this team. And I think John Blackwell might have something to say about that eventually. But he's been phenomenal. And Wisconsin's a lot of post-ups. Tonje is awesome at cutting off of those. They've also used him in pick and rolls. And look, he's a 6-year senior. He's an old veteran. He knows how to be at the right place at the right time. And he's getting to the free throw line at will, shooting it well from downtown. Really everything's coming together for him. And this is the kind of the version of roster building that Wisconsin's going to have to lean on right now while they get their NIL figured out. Because a lot of times this offseason, everyone's like, well, Wisconsin's pretty poor after they lost A.J. Storr and after they lost Chucky Hepburn in the portal. For them to go out and find a player like Tonje, like the ROI on an addition like this is through the roof.
Yeah, and I think it's only appropriate that we put the Wisconsin people on notice. Like, this isn't sustainable to go out and to spend so much less money than everybody else and hope to find a guy like John Tonje, because he has been exceptional. A few things I want to highlight here. Number one, obviously the ability to get to the free throw line. He had 22 free throw attempts against Arizona, but in 4 of the first 5 games, he's had at least 8. So although we don't expect him to get to the line 22 times, he's gotten there frequently in all but 1 game, and he's an exceptional free throw shooter. He's also become a very good 3-point shooter. I think the versatility within his skill set has made him especially effective. Like, he can score at different levels within the flow of the offense. He gets easy buckets because he gets to the free throw line. And you mentioned something earlier. I think he's a heck of a cutter too. So you combine that with a 23-year-old who's 6'5", physical, and can kind of play through contact, and then has this seasoned mind for the game as well. Played 4 years at Colorado State. Last year at Mizzou was basically a wash because of the injury. But this is a guy who knows how to play, and dare I say has been better for Wisconsin than AJ Storr was last year, which is why they as a team and he individually are drastically exceeding expectations so far. All right, I guess it's my pick in the draft, right?
That's how snake drafts works, I think.
Yeah. All right. So now I know I'm walking into this one because you're going to say he wasn't overrated. You always knew he was this good. But I'm going to go Ryan Nembhard from Gonzaga. I think Gonzaga is playing as well, if not better, than any team in the country. And I think Nembhard is the most important player on that team. You look at what they've done so far, smashing Baylor in the opener, beating Arizona State, going on the road and winning at San Diego State. And it's all because this guy is an absolute maestro. Everybody's talking about the assist to turnover ratio, and you should when it's 10-1. I'm going to say that again. 10 assists per game against just one turnover. That's absolutely insane. It's clearly unsustainable, but hey, it just goes to show like how advanced this guy is. But if we get into the weeds a little bit more, what I've really liked about him is the fact that he can do it at multiple tempos. So Gonzaga likes to get out and play in the open floor. And if you are a big man playing with Nembhard, you are motivated to run because he throws it ahead really, really well. In the half court, he's equally precise with his reads, playing with ball screens. And I'll say this too. He knows how to lead receivers in the half court just like he does in the front court. His individual offense has not been the priority. I think he's taken more than 7 shots once so far in a game, but his shooting percentages are off the charts just in terms of his efficiency with the ball. So this guy, I think, has been arguably the best player on the best team in college basketball through the first 2.5 weeks. But what say you?
You're singing his praises. This is my guy. This is the type of player that I've been really in on for a while. You know, we did our top 100 rankings for CBS Sports. I had Nembhard number 8 in that. Like, he is, to me, right up there. Hits him or Braden Smith as the best initiator point guard in college basketball. Gonzaga, 14 of the last 16 years, they've had a pick and roll offense that's rated in the 90th percentile or higher on Synergy. I think this year is no doubt like this team is going to be one of the elite pick and roll offenses in college basketball. And he's the kind of the really the straw that stirs the drink. He's the one that finds the lobs. He has that pocket pass down. He's getting wide open shooters, transition. They're awesome. And, I thought like San Diego State, like Brian Dutcher had a really good quote afterward that like Graham Ike should take him out to eat every single day because he makes life so much easier. Like that's Ryan Nembhard. I think he is playing like a first-team All-American, and maybe number 8 for him in my preseason top 100 was actually a little bit too low.
Well, he finished 26 in that preseason list, and if you had him in 8, that means some people had him in the 30s. I don't even remember where I had him, to be honest, but he is exceeding all my expectations. You mentioned that San Diego State game. I thought Mark Few had a very telling quote after that game. He talked about Nembhard's ability to not just handle the physicality, but also the noise of that building. And if you've ever like coached a game in that kind of environment, like sometimes your guys just can't hear you. And so to have a point guard who instinctively knows what to run and can run the team without necessarily a verbal interaction with his coach most times, that is such a luxury. And Nembhard gives them that. I mean, that is a really impressive road win in a rabid environment, and he handled it beautifully. So kudos to you for your early preseason pick, but he has certainly exceeded my expectations. All right, it's on to you, number 3. Who is the third player on your exceeding expectations team so far?
Well, this is another one of my loves. It's Otega Owe out of Kentucky, and he's averaging 15 points a game. And I swear, you go through all of his shots, they don't run a single play for him. Maybe 2, maybe 3 this year. It's like he scores through osmosis. He runs the floor. He gets deflections in transition and gets out on the break. He'll catch and shoot an open, three-pointer. If teams are sagging off of him, he'll just drive to the rim. And really, he's been a big part of Kentucky's much improved rim rate. He is constantly putting pressure on the rim, but he doesn't force anything. He doesn't have a super high usage rate. He just kind of guards and does his job. Like, he's just been awesome for them. And that's like the one thing that I love about this Mark Pope offense is that like you don't have to dribble and try to like get your one-on-one game on. It's finding openings, it's getting to the basketball and just attacking creases. And Owe has been a huge part of that. And plus, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up his defense. He was phenomenal defensively. He is their best defensive player. That steal that he had against Cooper Flagg late in the championship classic second half to really sealed the game. That was a big time play. So the defense being able to score without a play being run for you, like it's pretty incredible what he's doing this year. And he looks not maybe like Kentucky's best player, but like he's been one of their most important transfers so far.
All right, let me add to that because I couldn't agree more. The thing that has stood out to me is I think he fits with this team beautifully. Defensively, you said he's the best defender on their team. I think he's the best defender on 99% of teams in college basketball. But Kentucky's got two other guys that are potentially just as good, and Lamont Butler and Amari Williams. We could argue that all we want, but I think the point is that Owe doesn't have to guard the other team's best perimeter threat every night because sometimes Lamont Butler is going to do it. And when he does, that frees him up to be a playmaker, like we saw against Cooper Flagg, like we've seen him jump into passing lanes. The fact that he's got Amari Williams behind him frees him up that much more. And the ability to create offense from his defense, I think, has really gotten him into a rhythm where all of a sudden now he's making shots. We're talking about a player who made 1 3-pointer 2 years ago as a freshman at Oklahoma. Now, he took a big jump last year in terms of his percentage, but he was only making 1 3 about every 3 games. Now, this is unsustainable, but he's over 50% from the 3-point line. He's only taking wide open looks, but he's making them pay. And the other night, when opposing defenses started to go under ball screens, started to go under pin downs, which they always do against him, he stopped and shot behind it. So the amount of spacing Kentucky is playing with, the amount of defensive integrity they have in terms of like elite defenders who free him up to be a little bit more of a playmaker, I think it's all just a tremendous fit. And I couldn't agree more. He's been fantastic.
I think your point too about like just finding the right fit for you was so important in the portal. It's like, I think sometimes it's like, hey, is it big name, a lot of money? Like, is that important? Kentucky is a big name, but it's also a phenomenal fit just with all of the shooting they have and bigs who can pass. Owe really like is maximized when you have big men who can pass because that really brings out his cutting, and that's been on full display so far this year.
All right, the guy I want to talk about was at Kentucky last year, Adu Thero at Arkansas. I think he has been phenomenal. I mean, John Calipari said it the other night. He said, if there are 10 better players in the country than Adu, I need you to show them to me. And honestly, I think that's fair so far. I mean, what this guy has done, let's start with the physicality of it. 6'8", incredibly powerful, and an absolutely elite athlete. He had a play the other day where he had to reach down and catch like a loose ball. It was under his knees. And in one motion, he rose up and dunked the ball with 2 hands, like explosively. So he is a highest level athlete. I think even by NBA standards, I think his defensive versatility is off the charts. Then you have offense, and he's getting out in the open floor. He's made strides with his shooting, and he's making mid-range shots too. So in an Arkansas offense that is getting some catch and shoot mid-range shots, I present that without comment, and also allowing him some physical straight line drives to both sides into pull-ups, he's been really, really effective and on both ends of the floor. So to me, he's just been terrific so far.
No, I'm right there with you. I think that he's been their best player. And I think a lot of people coming into the year, you've been like, well, Boogie Flan's probably ahead of him, and Nelly Davis definitely ahead of him, and Jonas Adu's definitely ahead of him. Like right now, yes, I know injuries have popped up for Davis and Adu, but Thero is like their best player. And the one point you made too, Arkansas's transition rate, I think, is going to be really, really important this year. That's their best way to score when they get out in the open floor. Thero, like he embodies all of it. Like he's just a complete freak show in the open floor. I don't know how you stop him. I think there's a chance that he could lead college basketball in transition points per game this year.
Well, he's certainly one of the best finishers in the country. That goes without saying. All right, Trotter, we're going to wrap this up. We're each going to pick a freshman. Tell me who is your freshman overachiever so far.
I love LeBaron Philon. I think what he's brought to Alabama, Mark Sears is their best player. I think LeBaron Philon has been their best two-way player so far this season. His stop-start is absolutely ridiculous. He's just putting Purdue defenders in the dust when I was there watching him live on Friday. And then it feels like you have to really watch the full game, not just his highlights, to get the best version of what Philon is and see what he actually does. It's offensive rebounds. It's getting into the paint and spraying it out and finding shooters. It's pushing it in transition. It's stop-start. It's like the little hesitation move that he has where you can get into the paint. Like the skill, the shooting, and the feel is off the charts for him. And defensively, he's been great so far this year. Nate Oates has already called him one of their best perimeter defenders already. I don't know how he isn't a one and done at trajectory at this point. Like he literally is checking off every box for me right now. When you factor in what the NBA is really wanting with positional size, what they really want in shooting, and what they really want in feel, he has all three of those things. I genuinely think he's a one and done type prospect.
All right. That is interesting. I will say this. I think the game is easier for him now because he gets to play next to Mark Sears. Right now, he's shooting 36% from the 3-point line. We'll see if that is going to sustain, because that was one of the big question marks coming into the season. But certainly exceeding expectations. We've talked about this in a past episode, but I was there the first day of practice, and it was clear right away that he was the most ready of their four freshmen. Now, they had four freshmen all finish within the top 50 last year. Darian Reed was the guy who was getting the most one and done hype, and physically, he looked great. He'd put on 25 pounds of muscle, but he had a pair of injuries in the preseason that limited him. And Philon was the guy who was adjusting physically, adjusting mentally as well, in terms of understanding schemes on both ends of the floor, figuring out how to pick his spots and impact the game, but with less volume than he had in high school. So I'm right there with you. I'm not sure I'm co-signing the one and done thing just yet. But I will say this, like, if he continues to play at this level, there's an argument to be made for, like, hey, go while people are intrigued and not when you come back and Mark Sears isn't there and you're the focal point of every opposing scouting report, because that's a vastly different calculus of what the game could look like.
No, it's a great point, but I think just what he's been so far this year, like I genuinely think he's their best two-way player. It's honestly remarkable. I was not expecting that coming into this year. It's Cliff, it's Mark, it's Latrell Wrightsell. It's, hey, I've talked ad nauseum about Chris Youngblood, the transfer out of South Florida, but every time I watch Philon, it's like, man, he just impacts winning in so many ways. I love the dude. I think he's a phenomenal freshman and has been one of the best 5 freshmen in college basketball this season.
No doubt. I'm with you. All right. This one is for producer Kenny. We're going to talk about Georgetown freshman Thomas Sorber. Thomas Sorber finished as a top 50 recruit last year and was on a linear path, like continued to get better throughout the course of his high school career, continued to transform his body. If you see him right now, you wouldn't know it, but he was a wide body who struggled with conditioning for most of high school, but he really invested in getting himself into basketball shape. And the numbers he's putting up at Georgetown right now are just tremendously impressive. What has been, I mean, listen, here's the reality of it. I don't think he was recruited to be the starter from day one. You can look at who Georgetown pursued in the portal last year and tell, like, they had the intent of landing a starting center in the portal. They didn't get one. And so it comes down, Sorber had that opportunity to step right in. And not only has he been able to do that, but he's been able to do that by putting up incredible numbers. I mean, to get 20 and 13 and then 25 and 9 in your first 2 college games. Now, got a little tougher when Notre Dame came to town. Like, when it's not a bye game or a guarantee game, all of a sudden it gets a little more difficult. But the skill level, the way he's expanded his game, the way he's expanded his conditioning over the years has certainly made him one of the best freshmen in the country. And I think with LeBaron, one of the 2 most pleasant surprises in this freshman class so far.
He's been phenomenal. And the other thing I would add to that is he reminds me a little of like Colin Murray Boyles, where the first time you watch him, you're like, oh, he just gets it. Like, he just moves differently. He processes information well. You can see him reading the floor really well. I really like Sorber. I think he's got a chance. There's the Big East is tough for freshmen. It's Liam McNeely and it's Thomas Sorber right now for Big East freshman of the year. Those are the 2 guys that are really making impact. Well, the rest of the league is dominated by the old vets.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. All right, now we are going to turn the page and we are going to talk about the teams that have overachieved thus far, who are better than expectations coming into the season. And Trotter, we see this every year, right? Like, like Danny Hurley likes to say, where did people have us ranked preseason 2 years ago? Where'd they have us ranked last year? Well, we've already seen, I think, 3 of maybe the top handful of teams come up with a loss and others who have exceeded expectations. Let's start first with Kentucky. Obviously, the win over Duke at the Champions Classic. That was huge, but you have identified them as the team that has I don't want to say overachieved, but exceeded your expectations most so far. Tell me why.
Yeah, I think that the way that they're doing it is just a little bit different. I think the rim rate that they've had offensively is really impressive. I was in on this team. I had them ranked in the top 20. I think I had them top 4 or 5 in the SEC. So I was in on them, but the way that they're doing it without necessarily shooting, 50% of their shots from 3, they're awesome in transition. I love how they run off of makes. Like they're getting the ball out of the net, getting it up the floor, push ahead passes, and it's just working. And I think Kentucky really is the sum of its parts. Like everything just works together really well. I don't know if they have that alpha dog, like who's like the number 1 guy in late clock situations who can score. But I think the system is the alpha here. Like just the ability to have like a little bit different every night. Maybe it's a Kobe Brea night. Maybe it's an Otega Owe night. Maybe it's Lamont Butler getting into the middle of the floor and making plays. Maybe Jackson Robinson is getting going from 3. Maybe it's the bigs. Amari Williams has been great. Brandon Garrison coming off the bench has been really good. So everything here is working together very well. Now, I still have some questions about them defensively, but I do understand. I think that Mark Pope, his ability to adjust is huge. They were getting absolutely carved in pick and rolls in the first half against Duke. They completely ditched their pick and roll coverages, completely changed it in the second half, and had a lot better results. So you're kind of banking on the coaching and the roster construction here. And now we're kind of recalibrating my expectations for Kentucky, where I don't think it's crazy for them to be uttered in the same breath with an Auburn or an Alabama or a Tennessee as a legit SEC championship favorite. And I didn't have them there in the preseason.
All right, here's my 2 points on Kentucky. Number 1, my biggest question going into the year was all about roles. I thought they had 10 players and not very much separation between the two, and I wondered who would emerge into the alphas. Well, you know what? They beat Duke without having a necessary alpha, or at least different alphas during the course of the game. Right now, Mark Pope is playing 10 different guys double-figure minutes, and he's playing no one more than 24 minutes per night. I didn't think he could do that at Kentucky like he did it at BYU, but so far he's doing it and is doing it well. The other thing I would say, the offensive spacing that this team plays with, like we use that word a lot. We talk about spacing a lot, but you don't have to be a basketball coach or any kind of expert. You can just turn on the TV and say like, oh, none of Kentucky's players are standing next to each other at any point in time. Like, oh, they have one guy in that corner, one guy in that corner. They run to corners in transition. They have their spacing is as obvious as anyone's in the country, and they're passing the ball really well because of it. I think it's all been good. It's all been good.
The spacing is immaculate, and it's a chef's kiss. That's what it is. And I think Kentucky fans, for a lot of them, it's a breath of fresh air compared to what it's been in the past.
All right. Speaking of offensive execution, I want to talk a little bit about Notre Dame. They are 4-0 out of the gates. Micah Shrewsbury doing what Micah Shrewsbury does in constructing one of the most aesthetically pleasing offenses in the country. Now, listen, I don't want to jump the gun here because 3 of those 4 games were guarantee games. Guarantee games are where, very simply, you pay the other team to play you because you are expecting to win. Now, one of those games was a road win at Georgetown, which was very convincing. And I think the overall context is important here. Is Notre Dame going to be an NCAA tournament team? Maybe. Maybe not. I think they're going to be on the bubble, but to be on the bubble in year 2 is to exceed expectations. And what's more important than that, when you look at what they've done on the recruiting trail, they got a top 5 class in the country. They are still involved with Nate Amen, as we talked about in last week's signing day show. So you put all those things together, a team that is exceeding expectations on the floor, a team that is recruiting at an unprecedented level for the program and is still in the market to get another big-time player. I just think everything is going in the right direction for Notre Dame. And I'm going to say this, I enjoy watching them play. Like you watch and it is good basketball. They are running good stuff. Everything is well thought out. The schemes make sense. Things are going to get tougher. You look at the schedule coming up. We got Rutgers, Houston, Georgia, Syracuse. It's going to get tougher. But this is a team and a program that is undeniably heading in the right direction. And that game against Georgetown looked like a team that was ahead of schedule.
Well, and I think Notre Dame can play differently as well this year, too. They don't have to drag games into the mud like they had to last year. They have more offensive talent. They're playing faster. I think Tay Davis's development is awesome. If you stay for Micah Shrewsbury, you will get better. And then the ability to find the right guys in the portal. Matt Aloko, the transfer out of Princeton, like we've seen it in the past with all of Micah Shrewsbury's team. Like he can get shooters open. Aloko's a guy who's going to make a lot of threes this year. And Marcus Burton, if you don't know him yet, that sophomore point guard. Yeah, he led the one ACC and freshman in scoring last year, but this year as a sophomore, I think you're going to see just every part of his game kind of come together. So Notre Dame is one of the most improved teams in college basketball, and so far they've kind of lived up to the hype.
All right, this is the exceeding expectations show, but Trotter wants to talk about the team that he picked to win the SEC. So we're going to let him do his victory lap, and he's going to talk about Auburn.
Yeah, so like I was one or maybe two guys to pick Auburn to beat Alabama to win the SEC, and after
you deserve your flowers on this. Yeah, no doubt about it. Yeah,
like this was just simply a bet on this backcourt being a whole lot better with some guys leaving and some of the additions that they brought in. And Todd Pettiford has been a whole lot better than maybe I necessarily expected, but you've gotten the Miles Kelly game. You've had the Denver Jones as improvement. You've seen Chad Baker-Mazara continue to make another step. And then it also helps to have the best player in college basketball. And Janai Broome is that. He was my number one player in the top 101 rankings. He would be that if the season ended today, my pick for National Player of the Year. And then the Chaney Johnson emergence as well, too. He has really stepped up at the 4. So, yeah, we've had some turbulence on the plane and some interesting conversations off the court with Auburn. But this group runs great offense. They take way more threes this year. They turn it over less, and they foul less defensively. Those 3 pivot points have really put it together. This group is phenomenal, elite on both ends of the floor. They're a national title contender. They're number 1 in the country for me right now.
All right. And Broome is the best player in college basketball. Interesting. All right. I do have a question in all sincerity. You did pick them flowers. You were spot on this. But if I told you that JP Pegues was going to have these types of struggles and they were still going to be this good, would you have expected that? Because then if you were an Auburn believer, not you, Isaac Trotter, most people, if they were Auburn believers going into the season, if they were optimistic, it was because, hey, we finally got a point guard. It's JP Pegues. That hasn't really worked out. I mean, Todd Pettiford has stepped in, but I just think the fact that they are this good when he hasn't lived up to some of that transfer hype has been huge.
No, it's a great point. And, one thing I've tried to recalibrate my expectations for Auburn transfers just because they don't play many minutes. You don't have a lot of time to necessarily work out those kinks and get 32, 33 minutes a night. You get 17, and that's the way it is. And so I think Pegues is going to have his moments, but this group is awesome because of their depth and their star power at the top. So Pegues not getting off to a hot start, like that's nothing new. Look at all the transfer class in the 2024 cycle. A lot of guys are off to really slow starts. John Tonje is not included in this exercise.
All right, the team that I think deserves recognition so far this season is Arizona State. And I want to start with a little context. Arizona State went on the road to play an exhibition game against Duke, and they got blown out in Bobby Hurley's return to Cameron Indoor, which you have to assume was embarrassing. A very candid Hurley in the post-game press conference just owned it and said, hey, we stunk. We got to get a lot better. And they responded, and their early season schedule, like they beat Santa Clara, they beat Grand Canyon. Those are 2 teams projected to have a really good chance to play in the tournament. They beat a very underrated St. Thomas team out of Minnesota, terrific offensive team. And then they played Gonzaga within 8 points after Gonzaga blew the doors off of Baylor. Now, how have they done this? The point that I really want to emphasize here, and then I'm going to see what you think, Trotter. I want to talk about Jaden Quaintance because one of the things I was concerned about with this 17-year-old freshman was how he was going to adapt to all of the increased structure of college basketball. When someone's saying like, hey, we're hard hedging a ball screen on this side of the floor and we're weaking it in the middle, or whatever the case may be, like those are things he was never asked to do before. I think the way that Hurley has allowed him to be a roamer and a playmaker and not overcomplicated the game for him so much has just been a remarkable decision, allowed Quaintance to look like a defensive savant so far and really play his best basketball while simultaneously like learning as he goes. To me, that has been a huge variable. Listen, offensively, he's got a way to go, but defensively, he's beyond what anybody could have expected. What else has stood out to you about this Arizona State team and how they just candidly look a lot better than the team we saw at Cameron Indoor?
Yeah, I think they've insulated some of their youngsters in really nice ways too. Josan Sannon, you've seen moments from him where he's coming off pin downs and getting after it and just a really skilled shot maker. We knew that was his MO, but when he doesn't have it, they have other guys here. Austin Mason, a transfer out of Missouri State, has been really solid for them at point guard. Oh, look, another Missouri Valley transfer transferring up into the high major ranks and balling. Like, where have you heard this story before? Adam Miller, BJ Freeman, all of these guys like are veterans that have been in the building for a long time, have been in college basketball for a long time. Then Bashir Jihad, I think a lot of people really didn't love his tape out of Ball State, but he at the 4 has been awesome for them, just finding mismatches and going to work. But you're right. Quaintance is like my favorite story right now. Like the blocks that he has, like he's coming from the middle of the floor, jumping out to the 3-point line and swatting these dudes. And the shooters are like, how did you touch that ball? Like, how are you here? Like he is incredible. Like he would be on my short list for National Defensive Player of the Year right now.
But he's doing it with complete freedom, which I think is just absolutely crucial. Like if you take him out whenever he makes a wrong rotation, he's not playing very much. They are letting him go, and they are receiving the benefit because of it. All right, your 5th pick for overachieving team. Who you got?
Let's go out west to St. Mary's, and let's give Randy Bennett his flowers a little bit. They lose Aiden Mahaney to the portal. They lose Josh Jefferson to the portal, and they look fine. Paulius Maruskis, the transfer out of Arizona, has been phenomenal for them. Mikey Lewis, what an evaluation there. Another fringe top 100 type of player, but he's come in right away and looked like a prime shot maker who can really get it going both off the bounce and off the catch. Mitchell Saxon is still around, offering elite rim protection. Gus Marshallonis, the reigning West Coast Conference Player of the Year, just looks solid in his role. Doesn't have to do too much, just always on the floor, making the right plays at the right time. Jordan Ross, another sophomore that is starting to look a little bit more comfortable. Like this group is good. Like this team is going to be really, really pesky all year long. I don't think that they're in the Gonzaga tier, but the West Coast Conference has some really great teams. Like San Francisco looks ahead of schedule. I love Santa Clara's talent. They haven't played that well though so far. Like St. Mary's has been the one though that's really separated from that pack. I think a lot of people envision, St. Mary's is like kind of coming down. Maybe they could finish 3rd. Maybe they could finish 4th. Like no, like at this rate, like this group is clearly the 2nd best team in the West Coast Conference, and they have a real path to an at-large bid because Randy Bennett is really good at his job. Like sometimes we shouldn't overthink these things a little bit. Like new faces come in, things change, but if Bennett's on the sideline, St. Mary's is probably be pretty good.
It's been interesting to see how slow they are playing on the offensive end of the floor and then how much they are relying on the offensive glass. I know that's something you have written about, not specific to St. Mary's, but just more and more teams who feel like they don't have to choose between offensive rebounding and defensive transition. St. Mary's is going to the glass, and it's helped them to have a top 20 offense. Right now, they're number 4 in the country in offensive rebounding. So that is clearly working out for them. All right, the team I want to talk about, I'm going to wrap up here. I want to talk about Chris Holtmann because he took over a DePaul program that won 3 games last year. 3 games. And what have they done so far? Well, they haven't lost a game. They're 5-0. And, he's breaking the rule here because when you take over a program, you want to just make sure those expectations don't grow too much in year 1. You want to make incremental jumps and manage expectations. And I get it. They haven't played any high major schools yet. Their best win right now, aside from maybe an OT win over Southern Indiana, is probably Duquesne. But hey, they're 5-0. And they've got a chance to win their next couple of games before they head into Texas Tech and Providence. And I just think, listen, Chris Holtmann is one of the good guys in this business. I thought it was disappointing he didn't get a chance to finish the season last year at Ohio State. To his credit, he took over a DePaul program that has not been good for a long time, and he has made them respectable. And he's also done it in ways that is going to continue to build momentum on the recruiting trail. So I've liked everything I've seen so far from DePaul, and I just think Holtmann deserves some love for what he's been able to achieve so far in your hometown of Chicago. So you tell me what you got on them.
Well, the Moneyball aspect of this is real. They really went all in on trying to find 5 shooter lineups in the portal. David Skogman, the transfer out of Davidson's been really awesome for them as that 5-out center. And they just shoot a lot of threes. Last night against Eastern Illinois, they had a stretch where they just shot 14 threes in a row in 14 straight possessions. That's their game. But man, they can get after it. Jacob Meyer's been awesome for them. Isaiah Rivera, another transfer out of UIC, has been, a guy that I was really impressed with as an off-movement shooter when I was doing my portal research. So they've done a really good job, and they still haven't really totally unlocked Bladen Blocker yet. He's missed a game with an injury. He's working his way back. That Arkansas transfer is going to be a big deal for them. He had some huge showings in the preseason in some of their exhibition scrimmages. I think he's going to be a big part of this team. DePaul's good, man. Like they have improved a lot, and obviously it's coming from the basement, right? There's only way is up, but Chris Holtmann deserves a lot of credit for his ability to change using a unique way of like, hey, we just have to shoot a lot of threes. That gives us our best chance mathematically to win, and so far it's worked.
Yeah, they're top 10 in the country in threes attempted relative to all their field goal attempts, and they're top 12 in the country in terms of the amount of field goals that have been assisted. So they're playing with space, they're surrounding the court with shooting, and they are reversing the ball until they get open shots. It's just sound basketball, and it's got them a little bit ahead of schedule so far. All right, he is Isaac Trotter. I am Adam Finkelstein. You are watching the 24/7 Sports channel. You've got lots more. You can head on over to 247sports.com. You know what we've got over there: wall-to-wall team coverage, recruiting rankings, transfer portal updates, and of course, to keep it locked right here on the 24/7 Sports channel. We've got your football shows, we've got your basketball shows, and we are the place to be when it comes to the best football and basketball live commitments in the country.